the pressure-treated timber that marked the boundary between my property and the manicured common area of the Cypress Hollow Estates Homeowners Association, felt less like a divider and more like the front line of a very polite, very beige war. On one side stood my life's work, a small, sturdy 1962 ranch house, a yard filled with the organized chaos of a productive garden, and a koi pond that was more of a liquid Zen meditation than a water feature. On the other side stood Mara Yates, clipboard in hand, her smile as fixed and artificial as the silk hydrangeas flanking the HOA's entrance sign. "Good morning, Wes," she said, the words crisp and devoid of warmth. Her tennis visor, a permanent fixture, cast a sharp shadow over her eyes. "I was just admiring your new addition." She gestured with a perfectly manicured finger toward the stone Japanese lantern, nestled among the ferns near my pond. It wasn't new. It had been sitting in my workshop for months. I'd finally set it in place yesterday. A quiet tribute. It had been the last gift from my father before he passed. "It's a Toro," I said, keeping my voice even. "A garden lantern." "I see that," she replied, her pen making a small, decisive tick on a form attached to her clipboard. "Unfortunately, it appears to be in violation of the covenants, conditions, and restrictions, specifically. Section 8, subsection 4, paragraph 2. She recited the numbers from memory, a testament to her devotion. CC&R 8.4.2 prohibits unapproved yard ornamentation visible from the common area. It disrupts the aesthetic harmony of the community. I took a slow breath, the morning air rich with the scent of damp earth and my blooming gardenias. "Mara, we've been over this before. My property isn't in the HOA. It was grandfathered in. It predates Cypress Hollow by 3 decades. Her smile didn't waver. It was a marvel of suburban engineering. Our records show otherwise. "Wes, the community map clearly delineates your parcel as being within the association's jurisdiction. But don't you worry. It's just a courtesy warning for now. You'll receive a formal notice in the mail with instructions on how to cure the violation." She turned, her walking shoes making no sound on the perfectly edged lawn of the common area. She was calm, smiling, and utterly implacable. I, in turn, was polite but firm in my resolve. This wasn't her land, and that lantern wasn't just ornamentation. It was a memory, a piece of my father's quiet spirit, and it wasn't moving. "The notice will be a mistake," I called after her. She glanced back over her shoulder, her expression unchanged. "The association," she said, as if quoting scripture, "doesn't make mistakes." Back inside my house, the quiet felt different, less like peace, and more like the silence before a storm. I walked through the living room, my hand trailing over the familiar, sturdy furniture, the avocado green appliances in the kitchen, a source of amusement for my sister, were a comforting link to the home's original character. My life was one of precision and order, a habit forged over 30 years as a machinist for an aerospace contractor. I made components for satellites. Tiny, intricate parts where 1/1000th of an inch could mean the difference between a successful mission and a $100 million piece of space junk. That work taught me the profound importance of documentation. Every blueprint, every calibration report, every material certification, they were immutable truths. You don't argue with the blueprint, you adhere to it. I unlocked the fireproof safe in my office, a small room that smelled of machine oil and sawdust. Pushing aside my carefully cataloged smoker recipes, I pulled out a thick manila envelope. Inside was the property deed, the title, insurance, and, most importantly, the original survey map from when I purchased the house 15 years ago. I unrolled it on my drafting table. The thick, Slightly yellowed paper showed my lot. Parcel 7B with its boundaries marked in bold. Clear ink. The surrounding land, which would later become Cypress Hollow Estates, was labeled as undeveloped. A clear, legally binding note in the bottom corner read Said Parcel 7B is exempt from any and all future homeowners associations or covenants recorded for adjacent developing tracts. The blueprint was clear. I was right. I spent the rest of the afternoon in the backyard, my sanctuary. My father, a carpenter with a love for Japanese gardens, had helped me build it. We dug the pond ourselves, lining it with river stones. He taught me how to prune the dwarf maple and how to coax the wisteria into blooming. After he was gone, tending to this space became my way of continuing a conversation with him. The koi, shimmering jewels of orange and white, were his living legacy. The lantern was the final piece, a beacon in the quiet green space we had created together. The thought of dismantling any part of it felt like a betrayal. My phone buzzed. It was my sister, Sarah. "Just checking in," she said. Her voice, always practical and warm, was a welcome sound. She was an ER nurse, a profession that left no room for ambiguity, and she worried about me living alone. "Everything's fine," I lied. "Liar. I can hear it in your voice. What's wrong? Is it your blood pressure again? Did you use the machine I gave you?" I sighed, settling into the old Adirondack chair by the pond. "The HOA is acting up again." "Wes, please don't pick a fight. Is it really worth the stress? What is it this time?" "The height of your grass. The color of your mailbox." "A lantern. Dad's lantern." I explained Mara's visit. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Okay," she said slowly. "That's different. But you have the paperwork." "Right. The deed and the survey." "Of course I do. It's a bureaucratic mix-up. Sarah, that's all. I'll sort it out." "Just be careful," she warned. "People like that, they don't care about what's right. They only care about what's written on their little forms. Is fighting over a rock lamp worth a heart attack?" "It's not a rock lamp," I said quietly. "And yes, it is." I dismissed the threat, confident in my documentation. I was a man who believed in facts, in measurements, in the tangible proof of a notarized stamp on a piece of paper. Mara Yates and her binder of rules were an anomaly, a rounding error in an otherwise orderly world. I believed this for 10 days. Then the mail arrived. It wasn't a standard envelope. It was a green and white certified mailer from the United States Postal Service, the kind that requires a signature. It felt heavier than it should, weighted with bureaucratic menace. I signed the postman's scanner and took the letter inside, my hands suddenly clammy. The return address was a P.O. box for Pinnacle Property Management, the company that managed Cypress Hollow. I slid it open with a letter opener, my movements precise and deliberate, a stark contrast to the sudden, frantic beating in my chest. Inside was not a friendly reminder. It was a formal violation notice. The letterhead was thick, embossed with the Cypress Hollow logo, a stylized oak tree that looked more like a corporate emblem than something that grew out of the ground. The text was cold and impersonal. "Dear homeowner," it began, already premised on a falsehood. It cited my address and detailed the violation: installation of unapproved landscape ornamentation stone lantern in direct violation of Cypress Hollow CC&Rs, February 8.4.2. It informed me that I had 14 days from the date of the notice to cure the violation by removing the object. Failure to comply would result in a fine of $50, 50 warblers per day. Retroactive to the date of the notice, the fines, it helpfully noted, could be collected via assessment against the property. and delinquent accounts would be subject to the placement of a lien. My eyes scanned the page, catching on the legalese. They were threatening my home. The document was signed not by Mara, but by someone named David Chen, a community association manager at Pinnacle. Mara was using a corporate shield to wage her war. Stapled to the back was a photocopy of a map. It was grainy and poorly aligned, the kind of copy made by a machine low on toner. But the image was clear enough. It showed an overhead view of our section of the neighborhood. A thick, clumsy black line had been drawn around a group of properties, and mine was unequivocally inside it. It looked official enough to be convincing, and amateurish enough to be a lie. My pristine, surveyor-drawn blueprint was a masterpiece of cartography. This was a crude scrawl, a forgery born of toner and spite. The courtesy warning had been a feint. This was the opening salvo, the certified letter, the specific citation, the schedule of fines, the threat of a lien. This was not a mistake. It was an attack, and it was meticulously documented. My quiet, orderly world had just been served with a declaration of war. My first instinct was to fight fire with fire, to march over to Mara's house with my deed and survey and end this absurdity. But my machinist's mind took over. This wasn't a problem to be solved with confrontation. It was a system to be navigated. The proper venue, according to the notice, was a board meeting. The next one was scheduled for the following Tuesday. I would go. I would present my evidence. I would be calm, logical, and irrefutable. I would appeal to reason. That Tuesday evening, I walked into the Cypress Hollow Community Center. The room was sterile and smelled faintly of bleach and stale coffee. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a pallid, unflattering glow on the 20 or so homeowners seated in neat rows of metal folding chairs. At the front of the room, behind a long folding table, sat the 5-member board of directors. Mara was in the center, the president, flanked by her 4 lieutenants. One of them was Ted, my neighbor from 2 houses down, a retired accountant who looked perpetually uncomfortable, as if his polo shirt were 2 sizes too small. The meeting began with a recitation of the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a tedious approval of the previous month's minutes. Then, Mara announced the open forum, a 15-minute window for homeowners to voice concerns. Each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes, she said, pointing to a small digital timer on the table. Please state your name and address for the record. A woman stood up to complain about the speed bumps on Cypress Lane. A man asked about the timeline for resurfacing the community pool. Then it was my turn. I walked to the lectern at the front, my original survey and deed in a neat folder under my arm. My name is Wes Franklin. I began. I live at 412 Mulberry Lane. I'm here this evening to address a violation notice I received in error. Mara held up a hand, a gesture of polite interruption that was as effective as a gavel. Wes, thank you for coming. However, as per our bylaws, the open forum is for matters of general community concern. Specific violation disputes or account issues cannot be discussed in a public meeting due to homeowner privacy. I was momentarily stunned, but the violation itself is the issue. It's based on the false premise that my property is part of this association. I understand your position, she said, her voice dripping with practiced empathy. The correct procedure is to contact our management company, Pinnacle Property Management. They handle all record-keeping and enforcement matters. They will be happy to review your file with you. I have the official county survey right here, I said, holding up the folder. It proves my property is exempt. This could be cleared up in 5 minutes. Another board member, a severe-looking man with a military-style haircut, leaned into his microphone. Sir, the president has outlined the procedure. This is not the proper forum. Please direct your inquiry to Pinnacle. Next speaker. Ted wouldn't meet my eyes. He was staring intently at a smudge on his binder. I stood at the lectern, the folder in my hand suddenly feeling useless. I was being stonewalled, rerouted into a bureaucratic labyrinth designed to exhaust and defeat me. The faces in the audience were a mixture of sympathy and relief that it wasn't them at the lectern. They had their own battles to fight, over mismatched trash cans and unapproved basketball hoops. The next day, I called Pinnacle Property Management, after navigating a phone tree that felt designed by a sadist. I was connected to David Chen, the man who signed my violation notice. His voice was flat and disinterested. I explained the situation calmly and clearly, citing the note on my deed and offering to email him a copy of the official survey. "Sir," he said, his tone suggesting he was reading from a script, "I have the association's governing documents and official plat map right here. Your property, address 412 Mulberry Lane, is listed as a member parcel. Our records are official." "But your records are wrong," I insisted. "The original map filed with the county is the legally binding document. The one you're using is incorrect. If you wish to dispute the association's official records," he droned, "you may submit a formal request for a hearing with the board. The form can be downloaded from the community website. Please note that fines will continue to accrue until the matter is resolved." The line went dead. I was trapped in a perfect circle of procedural hell. The board directed me to the management company, and the management company directed me back to the board. It was a flawless system designed to protect itself, not to find the truth. And all the while, the meter was running, $50 a day. My sanctuary was being held for ransom, and my appeals to logic and evidence were being ignored. The feeling of frustration was quickly being replaced by a cold, simmering anger. This wasn't about a lantern anymore. It was about the principle that facts should matter more than a 3-ring binder full of rules. The certified letters became a regular feature of my life, each one a paper and ink escalation. The first was the hearing notice, summoning me to appear before the board in 2 weeks' time to present my case. The second, which arrived a day after the farcical hearing, where Mara and the board listened impassively before voting to uphold the violation, was the notice of fine. The initial charge was $700, 14 days to cure, at $50 per day. The letter informed me that a $50 fine would be levied every day the lantern remained. The financial pressure was a dull, constant ache in my chest. I wasn't destitute, but the thought of thousands of dollars draining from my retirement savings over a piece of stone was maddening. Sleepless nights became my new normal. I'd wake up at 3 a.m., my mind racing, rehearsing arguments and scanning documents I'd already memorized. My machinist's brain, trained to solve problems with logic and precision, was short-circuiting against an opponent who simply refused to acknowledge the facts. Sarah called every other day. "How are you holding up?" "Wes, your voice sounds strained. Have you checked your pressure?" "I'm fine," I'd say, the lie tasting more bitter each time. "I'm just working the problem." "This isn't a differential gear assembly, Wes. It's a bureaucracy. You can't fix it with a wrench." She was right. I needed a different kind of tool. My days became a blur of research. I spent hours on the Cypress Hollow HOA website, a poorly designed relic of the early 2000s. I downloaded the CC&Rs, the bylaws, the architectural guidelines, hundreds of pages of dense legalese. I read them until my eyes burned, looking for a loophole, a contradiction, anything I could use. It was in the website's public records section that I found the first real clue. The HOA was required to post the minutes of its monthly board meetings. I started downloading them. Going back a year, the documents were bland, filled with notes about landscaping contracts and pool maintenance schedules. But as I got to the more recent meetings the last 3 months, I noticed something odd. Large sections under new business and executive session were redacted, hidden behind thick, black boxes. It was a digital wall, hiding something the board didn't want the community to see. What kind of routine business required that level of secrecy? My investigation took me beyond my computer screen. I started paying more attention to the neighborhood. I saw the Johnsons, the retired couple at the end of the cul-de-sac whose property, like mine, was supposed to be exempt for years. Their yard had been a riot of prize-winning roses. Now, the rose bushes were gone, replaced by the same HOA-approved, soul-crushingly dull boxwoods that fronted every other house. Mrs. Johnson, who used to wave every time I drove by, now seemed to find the ground intensely interesting whenever I was near. She and the other non-HOA neighbors I knew looked fearful, their compliance a form of surrender. Mara wasn't just harassing me. She was running a campaign. I needed an expert. I thought of calling a lawyer, but I wasn't ready for that expense. Instead, I called an old friend, Mike, a retired surveyor I'd known for 20 years. I explained the situation, focusing on the discrepancy between my original survey and the HOA's crude map. "Wes," Mike said after listening patiently, "your deed and your survey are great, but they're just copies. What you need is the mother of all maps, the original Mylar plat map that was filed with the county when the subdivision was first recorded. That's the legal document of record. It's a physical object, stored in the county archives. It can't be edited with Microsoft Paint." He gave me the address for the county recorder's office. "Ask for the archives," he said, "and be prepared to get a little dusty." The next morning, I drove downtown to the county administration building, a monolithic concrete structure that looked like it had been designed to withstand a siege. The recorder's office was on the first floor, a vast room filled with the quiet rustle of paper and the low hum of computers. I approached the main desk and asked for the archives. The woman behind the counter looked up from her computer, her expression one of weary patience. She was in her late 60s, with sharp, intelligent eyes behind a pair of bifocals. A small nameplate on her desk read, "Dorothy Crenshaw, County Clerk." "What records are you looking for?" she asked, her voice raspy but clear. I explained my situation, mentioning the Cypress Hollow subdivision and the need to see the original plat map from its recording in 1996. A flicker of recognition crossed her face. HOA dispute. "Is it that obvious?" "Son," she said with a wry smile, "I've been working this counter since the Carter administration. I've seen more boundary wars than Napoleon. Come with me." She led me through a heavy door into a climate-controlled room in the basement. The air was cool and dry, thick with the smell of old paper and history. Rows of massive, flat-file cabinets stretched to the ceiling. Dorothy moved with an efficiency born of decades of practice, her fingers dancing over drawer labels. She pulled open a wide, shallow drawer with a soft metallic groan. "Here we are," she said. "Cypress Hollow Estates, recorded June 1996. She carefully lifted out a large sheet of translucent Mylar plastic. It was covered in precise, hand-drawn lines and elegant, stenciled lettering. It was a work of art. She spread it on a large, backlit table, and there it was, in undeniable black and white. My property, Parcel 7B, was outlined with a dotted line, clearly and explicitly designated as not a part of this plat. It was the smoking gun. It was the blueprint. It was the truth. I felt a wave of relief so profound it almost buckled my knees. "Can I get a certified copy of this?" "Of course," Dorothy said, already preparing the paperwork. "That'll be $20. As she worked, A thought struck me. Dorothy, while I'm here, could you help me look up something else? I need to see any easement records or development proposals for the vacant land adjacent to Cypress Hollow. She raised an eyebrow. Getting ambitious. Are we? She led me to another section of the archives, this one filled with binders. After a few minutes of searching, she pulled out a thick volume. Here's something recent. A preliminary development proposal, filed about 4 months ago. She opened the binder. The cover page read, Proposed Luxury Condominium Development, the Viridian Peaks. The developer was a corporation I'd never heard of. Viridian Peaks Development, LLC. I flipped through the pages, looking at architectural renderings of gleaming glass and steel buildings. Then I saw the site plan. My heart hammered against my ribs. A thick, red arrow labeled Protected View Corridor cut directly across the map. It originated from the proposed location of the luxury condos, crossed the vacant lot, and sliced straight through the backyards of the non-HOA properties, mine included. The view it was protecting was of the small lake and nature preserve on the other side of our neighborhood. That view, unobstructed, was the primary selling point for the multi-million-dollar condos Viridian planned to build. But my garden, my trees, the Johnsons' rose arbors, they were in the way. Then I found the correspondence section in the back of the binder. It was a series of letters between Viridian Peaks Development and local contractors and agents. And there, on a letterhead from a local real estate agency, was the signature. It was Mara Yates. She was listed as the community liaison and local agent of record for the Viridian project. Everything clicked into place with the force of a physical blow. The redacted minutes, the sudden pressure on all the non-HOA homeowners, the fraudulent map. This was never about a Japanese lantern. It was never about aesthetic harmony. It was about money. Big money. Mara wasn't just an overzealous HOA president. She was a real estate agent with a massive potential commission on the line. I later discovered through public records that her career had been flagging. She had multiple liens on her own property and was facing foreclosure. The kickback from the developer wasn't for a cruise to Aruba. It was to save her from financial ruin. She wasn't trying to enforce rules on me. She was trying to seize control of my property rights to clear a path for a multi-million-dollar view. My peaceful backyard was standing in the way of her financial salvation, and she had decided to bulldoze it, one violation notice at a time. Armed with a certified copy of the Mylar plat map and the Viridian Peaks proposal, I felt a surge of confidence. The truth was on my side, documented and undeniable. My next move was calculated, instead of confrontation. I chose procedure. I drafted a polite, formal letter to David Chen at Pinnacle Property Management. I attached the certified copy of the plat map and a brief, factual summary of my findings, omitting any mention of the Viridian project for the time being. I stated, simply, that their records were in error. The proof was attached, and I expected an immediate cessation of all violation notices and a full reversal of the accrued fines. I sent it via certified mail, creating my own paper trail. I expected a retraction, perhaps a grudging apology. What I received a week later was a declaration of total war. It was a thick, cream-colored envelope from a law firm, Dewey, Cheatham and Howe, a name so brazen it was almost comical. The letter, however, was not. It was a cease and desist notice. It accused me of slander of title and tortious interference with the contractual operations of the Cypress Hollow Homeowners Association. It claimed my unsubstantiated allegations and falsified documents were causing harm to the association. It demanded I immediately cease all communication with the board and management, and retract my claims in writing. If I failed to do so, they would pursue all available legal remedies to the fullest extent of the law. It was signed by a senior partner, whose name was followed by a string of intimidating acronyms. They were calling my certified county document a forgery and threatening to sue me for presenting it. It was a breathtakingly audacious move. A legal blitzkrieg designed to intimidate, overwhelm, and bankrupt me into submission. 2 days later, the final blow landed. Another certified letter. This one from the HOA's attorneys. It was a formal notice of intent to file a lien against my property for the delinquent amount of $200 in unpaid fines. My property, my home, the sanctuary my father and I had built, was now officially under threat. The procedural war had escalated to a point where I could actually lose everything. The stress was no longer a dull ache. It was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest day and night. That evening, there was a quiet knock at my back door. It was Ted, the board treasurer. He looked even more anxious than he had at the meeting, his eyes darting nervously toward the street. "Can I come in?" he whispered. "I can't stay long." I let him in, and he stood awkwardly in my kitchen, refusing my offer of a drink. "Wes, I shouldn't be here," he said, his hands fidgeting. "But this has gone too far. What Mara is doing, it's not right." Ted had joined the board to help fix the neighborhood gutters and organize the annual picnic. Not to be an accessory to a conspiracy. He was a man of numbers and rules. And he was terrified. "The Viridian deal is real," he confirmed in a low voice. Mara presented it to the board in an executive session. That's what's in those redacted minutes. She sold it as a way to increase our property values. She promised the developer would make a substantial donation to the HOA's reserve fund if we could. Ensure community compliance with view corridor standards. Most of the board just went along with it. They don't want to make waves. "She's using fraudulent maps and threatening people." Ted. "I know," he said, his face pale. "She's trying to force you and the others to sign over a scenic easement. She's told the board you're just a stubborn troublemaker. The law firm, that's being paid for out of our dues. Wes, we're paying them to help her take your land." He took a deep breath. "The annual homeowners meeting is next month. It's the one meeting the board can't completely control. You can sign up for a 5-minute speaker slot. It might be your only chance to get the truth out to everyone." He looked at me, his expression pleading. "But you have to be careful. She will ruin anyone who gets in her way. She threatened to run an audit on my personal business if I didn't vote with her. She'll do the same to you, or worse." He left as quietly as he came, leaving me with a stark choice. I could fight, risking financial ruin and the full wrath of a corrupt board and their high-priced lawyers. Or I could surrender, sign away a piece of my soul, and watch a glass tower rise over the ghost of my father's garden. The choice was never really in question. I spent the next 3 weeks preparing for a 5-minute battle. I was no longer just a homeowner. I was an intelligence analyst, a legal strategist, and a prosecutor building a case. I organized my evidence with the same precision I used to machine satellite parts. I created a simple, powerful PowerPoint presentation. I practiced my speech over and over, timing it with a stopwatch, trimming every unnecessary word until it was a lean, 5-minute weapon of truth. A few days before the meeting, a plain manila envelope appeared on my doorstep. Inside was a USB stick. No note. I plugged it into my computer. It contained a single file, a PDF of the unredacted minutes from the last 3 board meetings. Ted had come through. The minutes laid it all out: the secret vote to enter into an agreement with Viridian, the authorization to spend HOA funds on legal actions to secure the view corridor, and Mara's clear conflict of interest as both HOA president and the developer's real estate agent. It was the final piece of the puzzle. The night of the annual homeowners meeting. The community center was packed. This was the big one, where the budget was approved and new board members were elected. Over 100 residents filled the folding chairs. The air was thick with a mixture of civic duty and the desire for the free cookies in the back. Mara and the board sat at the front table, looking confident and in control. A large projector screen hung behind them, currently displaying the Cypress Hollow logo. Next to it, on a small stand, was a large digital clock, already set for the 500 speaker timer. My speaker slot was third on the agenda. When my name was called, a knot of cold dread and fierce resolve tightened in my stomach. I walked to the lectern, my laptop in one hand and Ted's USB stick in my pocket. "Good evening," I said, my voice steady. "My name is Wes Franklin. I live at 412 Mulberry Lane. For the past several months, your board and its management company have been pursuing a fraudulent enforcement action against my property. I am here tonight to show you why." I connected my laptop to the projector. The Cypress Hollow logo vanished, replaced by my first slide. The countdown clock on the stand began. "Boys, so, wire." "This," I said, as the HOA's grainy, spray-painted map appeared on the screen, "is the map the board is using to claim jurisdiction over my property." I let the image hang there for a moment. 450, 449. And this. I clicked to the next slide. Is the official, sealed, and legally binding Mylar plat map on file with the county recorder's office. The clear, precise lines of the surveyor's map appeared next to the fraudulent one. I had highlighted my parcel, showing it clearly outside the HOA's boundaries. A low murmur rippled through the crowd. 415. 414. The board's enforcement action against me is based on CC&R Section 8.4.2. I continued, advancing the slide to show the text of the rule. As you can see, this rule regarding yard ornamentation applies only to lots within the association. As the official plat map proves, my property is not, therefore, this entire action is based on a lie. 330. 329. The murmurs grew louder. Board members shifted uncomfortably. Mara's smile was gone, replaced by a tight, angry line. So the question is, why? Why would the board spend our HOA dues on management companies and law firms to pursue a case they know is baseless? The next slide showed a picture of the redacted meeting minutes I'd downloaded from the website. 245. 244. The board has been hiding the reason in redacted executive session minutes. They don't want you to know about their deal with Viridian Peaks Development to build luxury condos on the adjacent land. I clicked again. The unredacted minutes appeared on screen. The key phrases highlighted in yellow view corridor. Agreement with Viridian. Substantial donation. Gasps erupted from the audience. 2. What was you? 159. This was never about a lantern, I said, my voice rising with controlled indignation. It's about clearing a multi-million-dollar view. And our HOA president, Mara Yates, is the developer's real estate agent. She has a direct financial stake in forcing me and other non-HOA homeowners to give up our property rights. I put up the final slide, showing Mara's name on the Viridian proposal. 110. 109. Mara shot to her feet, her face crimson. This is an outrage. These are lies based on stolen, confidential documents. This is slander. She glared at the board table, her eyes locking onto Ted, who had gone as white as a sheet. I demand to know your source. I demand to know which traitor on this board leaked those documents. The room fell silent. Everyone turned to look at me. The clock ticked down. 0:45. 0:44. This was the moment. I could point to Ted, corroborate my story, and save myself. But I would be throwing the terrified man who helped me to the wolves. Mara would destroy him. I looked directly at Mara, my voice dropping to a calm, lethal level. My source is irrelevant. The unredacted minutes of an HOA board meeting are, by state law, public record available to any homeowner who files the correct information request. I turned my attention back to the audience. The only question you should be asking is not how I got these documents, but why your board president redacted them in the first place. I had turned her accusation back on her, protecting my ally while simultaneously indicting her. The logic was inescapable. The digital clock on the stand hit. Well, and beeped softly. My time was up. The room erupted. The carefully controlled order of the meeting dissolved into chaos. Homeowners were on their feet, shouting questions at the board table. Is this true? Are our dues paying for this? What is this developer deal? The representative from Pinnacle Property Management, a young man in an ill-fitting suit, tried to restore order, but his voice was lost in the din. Mara stood frozen, her face a mask of disbelief, as she watched her carefully constructed empire crumble in less than 5 minutes. Then, a new voice cut through the noise. It was Ted. He stood up slowly, his hands trembling, but his voice surprisingly firm. I believe, he said, speaking into his microphone, that a motion is in order. The room quieted, all eyes turning to him. I, Ted Kowalski, treasurer of this association, move for an immediate vote of no confidence in our president, Mara Yates. Another board member, a woman who had remained silent throughout the proceedings, immediately spoke up. I second the motion. The community had turned. The polite facade had shattered, revealing the rot beneath. Mara was alone, exposed by a set of blueprints and her own boundless greed. In the weeks that followed, the Cypress Hollow HOA underwent a revolution. Mara was voted out in a landslide recall election. The management contract with Pinnacle was terminated. An interim board, led by Ted, was established. Their first official act was to send me a formal, written apology, rescinding all fines and violations and affirming, for the public record, the exempt status of my property. The Viridian Peaks deal, exposed to the sunlight of public scrutiny, withered and died. The developer quietly withdrew their proposal, unwilling to be associated with the scandal. I began to rebuild my garden. A local landscaping company, hearing the story, donated their time and materials to help me reconstruct the koi pond. Neighbors, both from inside and outside the HOA, stopped by to offer support, to share stories of their own run-ins with Mara, and to thank me for speaking up. The invisible walls of fear and procedural intimidation had come down. One sunny Saturday afternoon, as I was placing the last riverstone around the new pond, a letter arrived in the mail. It wasn't a certified notice. It was a simple, plain envelope. Inside was a letter signed by the Johnsons, the Patels, and 2 other families whose non-HOA properties bordered the development. They informed me that, inspired by my actions, they had pooled their resources and retained legal counsel. They were filing a class action lawsuit against Mara Yates personally, Pinnacle Property Management, and Viridian Peaks Development for conspiracy, fraud, and extortion. They were using the evidence I had uncovered as the foundation of their case. My personal 5-minute battle had not just saved my own backyard, it had armed and empowered an entire community to fight for their own. I walked back to my garden, the letter in my hand. Marvin, my old beagle, trotted happily beside me, his tail wagging for the first time in months. I placed my father's stone lantern back in its rightful place among the ferns. Its quiet, enduring presence a testament to the simple, powerful fact that the truth, when properly documented, is the most formidable weapon of all. My Zen zone was finally at peace.